Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Andrew Borden now is dead. Lizzie hit him on the head. Up in heaven he will sing. On the gallows she will swing. An anonymous quote. Famous trials and cases are not always cut and dry. Rumors can swirl, evidence may not add up, and the public is very good at forming their own opinions, regardless of what's right. Over time, lines get blurred, and the true stories and motives are buried under fiction and speculation. Though sometimes, speculation is all people have. Andrew Borden came from a wealthy and influential family, yet still grew up modestly and struggled financially as a young man. He married Sarah Morse on Christmas Day, 1845, and they moved into a house in Fall River, Massachusetts. They had 3 children: Emma, Alice, and Lizzie. Sadly, Alice died of hydrocephalus at 22 months old. Andrew did well for himself as an adult, starting with the manufacture and sale of furniture and caskets. He moved on to property development, becoming the director of several textile mills, owning commercial property, and becoming the president of Union Savings Bank and the director of the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Co. He amassed a fortune. Despite having money and living in an affluent neighborhood, the Bordens lived below their means and didn't indulge in a lot of luxuries like others of their class. They didn't even have indoor plumbing like many others already had at the time. When Lizzie was 3 years old, her mother died of uterine congestion and spinal disease. Andrew needed a mother for his girls and remarried on June 6, 1865. Abby Durfee Gray became Abby Borden, and Lizzie was made to call her mother. The Borden family were religious and attended the Central Congregational Church. As she aged, Lizzie got more involved in church programs and functions. She was a Sunday school teacher for children of recent immigrants. She was the secretary-treasurer for the Christian Endeavor Society. She was part of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and she was a member of the Ladies' Fruit and Flower Mission. Lizzie and Emma didn't have much love for their stepmother. When she got older, Lizzie stopped calling Abby Mother and instead called her Mrs. Borden. They didn't like how their father spoiled her and her family by giving them real estate. The sisters avoided their parents as much as possible. The Bordens' live-in maid, Bridget Maggie Sullivan, said they rarely ate meals together. In June 1891, Lizzie, Emma, and Bridget were home when a daring daytime robbery occurred. Cash and jewelry were taken from the Borden home, and Lizzie was the prime suspect. She had been accused of shoplifting by a local merchant earlier, so all eyes were on her. After this, all doors of the Borden house, inside and out, were kept locked. Things were tense in the Borden house. Tired of Abby and her family getting their father's favor, Lizzie and Emma demanded a rental property of their own. But not just any property. They wanted the house they lived in until their mother died. Lizzie and Emma paid their father $1 for the house. When the sisters decided they were done owning the property, they chose to sell it back to their father and made a decent profit. Andrew purchased the home from his daughters for $5,000, or roughly $178,000 in 2025. In May 1892, Andrew upset Lizzie further. She had built and maintained a roost in the barn for the pigeons that lived in the area. Andrew believed the birds carried infections and diseases and killed many of them with a hatchet. 2 months later, there was a massive argument among the Bordens. It prompted the sisters to pack up and leave for a vacation in New Bedford. When they did return to Fall River, Lizzie chose to stay in a rooming house for 4 days. At the beginning of August, the Borden household came down with a stomach bug and were violently ill for a few days. Abby expressed concern that it could have been poison, as her husband was not well liked in Fall River. When the household recovered, Andrew invited John Morse, Lizzie and Emma's maternal uncle, to come stay for a few days so they could discuss business. He arrived on the evening of August 3rd and stayed in the Bordens' guest room. In the morning, everyone was present for breakfast, except for Lizzie. John left the house shortly before 9 to buy a pair of oxen and visit his niece in Fall River. Andrew left 10 minutes later, around 9 a.m., for his morning walk and to mail some letters for Lizzie. Usually, it was Lizzie and Emma's task to clean the guest room. But that morning, Abby went upstairs to make the bed sometime between 9 a.m. and 10:30. Abby never came back downstairs. In the guest room, Abby was attacked with a hatchet. She was first struck on the head and cut just above the ear. Abby fell face first on the floor, receiving contusions to her nose and forehead. Her attacker then hacked at her repeatedly, delivering 17 more blows to her head and killing her. Andrew returned home around 10:30 a.m. His key didn't work, and he had to knock to be let inside. When Bridget answered the door, it was jammed, and she cursed. Lizzie laughed from somewhere at the top of the stairs, but Bridget didn't see her. When Andrew got inside, Bridget helped him out of his boots and into his slippers. Before lying down for a nap in the downstairs sitting room, he asked Lizzie where Abby was. She told her father that a messenger had delivered a summons for his wife to visit a sick friend, and she was out. After washing windows, Bridget was upstairs resting in her room when at 11:10 a.m., Lizzie called to her. "Maggie, come quick! Father's dead! Somebody came in and killed him!" Andrew was slumped sideways on the sofa in the downstairs sitting room, dead from numerous hatchet wounds. He had been struck 10 or 11 times, and one of his eyes was split cleanly in two. Andrew's wounds were still bleeding when he was found, meaning they were fresh. When Bridget got downstairs, Lizzie told her not to enter the sitting room. She instructed the maid to go across the street and fetch the doctor. Bridget quickly returned with the doctor and neighbor, Mrs. Churchill. The two women discovered Abby's body when they went upstairs and saw into the guest room. Dr. Bowen pronounced both victims dead. Detectives arrived and began their investigation. They determined Andrew was killed around 11 a.m., and their crime scene photos showed that Andrew was still wearing his boots, despite Bridget claiming she helped him put on his slippers. When they questioned Lizzie, her answers were all over the place. At first, she claimed to have heard noises, but then she said she heard nothing. She also claimed she believed her stepmother had returned home, and that was why she sent Bridget and Mrs. Churchill upstairs to look for her. Officers said they didn't like how calm and poised Lizzie was during the interviews. Detectives should have been just as concerned with the crime scene as they were about Lizzie's attitude. They failed to check Lizzie for bloodstains and never properly searched her room. When they looked through the house, they found 2 hatchets, 2 axes, and a hatchet head and broken handle in the basement. The hatchet head appeared to have been deliberately covered in ash and dust to make it look as though it had been there a long time, and it was considered to be the murder weapon. However, officers didn't take any of the tools from the house. When autopsies were performed on the victims, they were tested for poisoning due to the illness in the house days prior. Lizzie had also been suspected of trying to buy highly toxic inflammable hydrochloric acid, which she claimed would have been used to clean her furs. Neither victim was found to have been poisoned. Alice Russell, a friend of the Borden sisters, decided to stay with the women the night following the murders. Police were stationed outside the house, and one officer reported seeing Lizzie and Alice enter the cellar with a kerosene lamp and a slop pail. After both women left, he said Lizzie returned alone and was working over a sink, though he didn't know what she was doing. In the morning, John, who was still staying with the Bordens, tried to leave, but was mobbed by people. Officers had to escort him back into the house. Police did a second, more thorough search of the house that day as well. They inspected clothing and confiscated the hatchet head. That evening, the mayor of Fall River joined officers at the Borden house to inform Lizzie that she was officially a suspect in the murder of her father and stepmother. On the morning of August 6th, Alice saw Lizzie tearing up a dress. Lizzie told her she intended to burn the dress because it was covered in paint. An inquest was held on August 8th, and Lizzie requested to have her family attorney present, but was denied. While she was being questioned, her answers were contradictory when she did reply, often refusing to answer at all. Her behavior was erratic as well. This may have been due to the morphine she had been prescribed to calm her nerves. A few days later, on August 11th, Lizzie was arrested and jailed. She waited in jail for nearly a year before her trial began in June 1893. Just 5 days before the trial began, another axe murder occurred in Fall River. Bertha Manchester was hacked to death in her kitchen. There were striking similarities between this and the Borden murders. This may have affected the outcome of the trial, at least in part, but in 1894, Jose Carrera de Mello was convicted of the crime. He had not been in Fall River when the Bordens were killed. The trial started on June 5, 1893. Lizzie's testimony from the inquest was ruled inadmissible, and the prosecutors failed to convince the court that the hatchet head they took from the home was the murder weapon. When officers testified, their statements conflicted about finding a broken handle near the hatchet head. Alice was called to the stand and told the court about Lizzie burning the dress she claimed was covered in paint. There had been no bloody clothes at the crime scene, so the defense never challenged Alice's statement. After the murders, Lizzie told people she had been out in the barn for 20 minutes or possibly half an hour at the time of her father's murder. Her neighbors, Hyman Lubinsky and Charles Gardner, testified for the defense, confirming that Lizzie left the barn at 11:03 a.m. During the autopsies, the heads of Andrew and Abby were removed. The skulls were admitted into evidence at the trial, and when Lizzie saw them, she fainted. The jury went for deliberation on June 20th. They took a mere hour and a half to go over the trial and return with a verdict of not guilty. Lizzie Borden was acquitted of both murder charges. Upon leaving the courthouse, she said she was the happiest woman in the world. Following the trial, Lizzie started going by the name Lizbeth. She and her sister moved into a new, modern house in the Hill neighborhood of Fall River. It was fully staffed and offered everything the women wanted growing up. Lizzie dubbed the home Maplecroft. Lizzie and Emma inherited a substantial amount of money from their father. As Abby died before Andrew, her entire estate passed to him, which in turn went to the sisters. They did pay a large settlement to Abby's family, however. Despite her acquittal, Lizzie was ostracized in Fall River. Her name was occasionally brought back into the public eye, particularly after she was accused of shoplifting in Providence, Rhode Island in 1897. In 1905, Lizzie held a party for actress Nance O'Neill. This event opened a rift between Lizzie and Emma. The sisters argued, leading to Emma moving out of the shared home. They never saw one another again. In 1926, Lizzie had her gallbladder removed. She never quite recovered and remained ill for a year before dying of pneumonia in 1927. She was 66 years old. Her funeral details were never made public, and few people attended. Just 9 days after Lizzie's death, Emma died of chronic nephritis. She passed in a nursing home in Newmarket, New Hampshire. The sisters were buried together in the family plot in Oak Grove Cemetery. At the time of her passing, Lizzie was worth $250,000. roughly $4,457,698 in 2025. She owned 2 cars, several pieces of property, shares in several utilities, and a large amount of jewelry. She left $30,000, roughly $558,579 in 2025, to the Fall River Animal Rescue League. Put $5,000, roughly $88,576 in 2025, in a trust for the perpetual care of her father's grave, and gave substantial amounts to family and friends. Over time, Lizzie Borden became more of a horror story than a real woman who may or may not have killed her parents. No motive was ever really linked to the murders, but many have been discussed. Some believe Lizzie had been sexually abused by her father for years. Others think that a relationship between Lizzie and Bridget had been discovered. Some even speculate it wasn't Lizzie at all, but her uncle, John Morse, who was bitter toward Andrew. There's evidence for both sides of the case, but no matter what the unknown truth is, the public unanimously decided that Lizzie Borden was guilty of the crimes. As such, she will remain a scary story and model for fictional characters for many years to come.